Hello, everyone. Welcome to this new edition of the Exponential Blueprint. It's an exciting edition because today we're going to talk about a $14 trillion opportunity. And the name of this series is Exponential Exit, Private Markets and Public Ambition. Now, I am joined today by James Ant, who is a real expert in this particular field. James is a private market expert, and I'll let James introduce to me immediately. Go ahead, James.
Hello, Matteo. Thanks very much for inviting me onto the Exponential Blueprint. I'm a corporate lawyer by background and training, City of London, going back to the early 1980s. And I've had a journey as an entrepreneur as well as a business lawyer. I started two different law firms, and I'm now operating as Everyman Advisory. Pleased to be here to chat to you.
Thank you so much, James. It's great to have you here. And let me tell you about myself again to the audience. I'm the owner and the founder of the Exponential Blueprint. I'm a CFO expert and I conduct mergers and acquisition activities. And the opportunity we're going to be talking today about is private markets. Now, private markets, as I said before, they are $14 trillion opportunity. So for you watching this, for you founders or investors or C-suite executive, and especially for businesses that are looking to access capital markets, the message is you're not too small. You're just not positioned yet. Now, let's have a look and see what we're going to be talking about. We're going to have four parts of this. The first one is going to be about James. James today is going to tell us about his vision, his background, and his entrepreneurial journey over so many years. And we're going to touch on that today. Then part number two is he's going to tell us about the future of private markets. And in particular, we're going to look at very powerful innovation through Asset Match and Pisces. Yeah, Pisces. Did I pronounce it correctly, James?
You
Yeah?
did.
Okay.
Pisces, as in the zodiac, the sign of the zodiac.
Okay. Okay, that's great. I was worried about this one. Okay, I pronounced it correct. That's a major innovation that you just cannot miss. You just cannot miss as a founder or as a business entrepreneur if you're running your business. Yeah. Now, the third part is going to be how we're going to empower private companies. So effectively by accessing the capital markets. And the fourth one is where Pisces and the Exponential Blueprint align together. So, James, are you ready for part one?
I am indeed ready to go.
Okay, let's start immediately then. So, let's come and talk about your vision, your background. Tell us a bit more about your story. And in particular, the first question is what inspired you to work with entrepreneurs in general? Where's your passion coming from? And how did you create the Supper Club Sophie 1845? Explain to us how did this come about? We're very curious to understand your story.
Right, lovely. Thanks, Matteo. So the vision of Sophie Enterprise is a collaborative collection of pioneering advisors. And I look back now, this is something I've been working on for over 40 years. So the starting point for my career as a lawyer was back in the early 1980s. I went to a small law firm in High Holborn. Then I moved to Clifford Turner, as they were in my day. They became Clifford Chance after I left. Now, what I hadn't realized then was they were a very entrepreneurial law firm. Entrepreneurs and lawyers are words that don't usually sit together. But at Clifford Turner, they had some very driven, ambitious, and entrepreneurial lawyers. I found it utterly terrifying, I have to say, for the first 6 months. And then I found my feet. And I found my feet doing the flotation. I've still got the Bible. This company, Hawtall Whiting Holdings
How old is
PLC.
that document?
Yeah, it's a Bible now. It's rather fat, you'll see, because when I sent it to the photocopiers, I forgot to say copy it front and back, and I was very embarrassed when I came back from the printers looking like this thing. Anyway, so this is really important to understanding what we're going to come on to, because you'll see the sponsor here was a small firm of stockbrokers called Simon and Coates, and they were taking this company onto what was called the unlisted securities market. This was a market set up by the London Stock Exchange in the early 1980s. They were trying themselves to be entrepreneurial. They ended up rebadging it as the alternative investment market, AIM,
Did you
which is
say
how.
unlisted? Yeah.
So this, well, it used to be called unlisted, the
Explain to the
unlisted
audience, about
securities market.
explain to the audience about listed. We are very curious to know
Well,
about
they're all just words, aren't they?
it.
End of the day. So in the London Stock Exchange language, it was always very important when we were drafting the prospectus that we called it the unlisted securities market to distinguish it from the listed securities market, which was the main market of the London Stock Exchange, which was for the premier companies that had full transparency and the right range of advisors. So anyway, this was for high growth companies, often early stage. They could be startups, greenfields as they were called. Now, this company, Hawtor Whiting, was utterly fascinating. So this was the 1985. This was floated, early 1985.
That's 40 years ago then, yeah?
40 years, I know,
40 years
makes me
ago,
feel old.
okay.
It doesn't actually make me feel
Happy
old. It
birthday
makes me
for that
feel
document.
makes me feel experienced. So they were so the name here is fascinating because it was a made-up name for four people. That was the four who originally conceived they were going to start Hawtor Whiting, and
Mhm.
then one of them dropped out. And there were three guys who floated this company with our support, and they came from the Ford Motor Company, and they were draftsmen. And it was just at the start of computer-aided design. And they saw an opportunity which they took. They formed Hawtor Whiting, and 20 years later, or 15 years later, we were floating them on the unlisted securities market. So it's very exciting. I was a young lawyer in my mid-20s, and the was it 3 or 6 months we worked on the project? Anyway, it was just the most magical
Mhm.
time of my life. And I was working with a brilliant city lawyer, Jeremy Brownlow, and he was teaching me about becoming a corporate lawyer. And I suddenly realized it's all about the people. It's wonderful. Anyway, so that was the start. So now this is then very interesting because the next Bible I'm going to show you, thin because I learned that you photocopy it front and back.
Mhm.
This Simon and Coates had now become Chase Manhattan Securities.
Mhm.
Now, I don't know, Mattia, whether you're old enough to remember the Big Bang in the City of London.
1986, right? Yeah. Margaret
Yeah,
Thatcher, yeah?
Margaret Thatcher. She was
Yeah.
unleashing the enterprise spirit. And I look back now, she used to be my great heroine, Margaret Thatcher. And I think, oh dear, Margaret, what did you unleash?
What about
So,
the name, 1845, Sophie 1845? Tell us more about this, yeah?
1845 Supper Club.
Yeah.
First of all, why is it called 1845? Because
Yeah.
it starts at 7:15. It's
Quarter to
nothing to do
seven.
with
Ah, okay. So that's the time of the supper.
that's the
Okay.
time
That's
of the
clear.
supper. Yes, one digit after 1984. Um, the Supper Club. So right. So let's start with the Supper Club and then move back. So the Supper Club is all about creating an environment where entrepreneurs can meet entrepreneurial advisors, enjoy their company, form relationships and friendships to enable then business to be done. Because I think business always has to start over food and drink, which is where you and I started
With pleasure,
originally,
yeah.
Matthew, at Bill's in Hammersmith. Um, right. So, what am I gonna go on to describe now why I set up Sophie Enterprises?
And why Sophie, the name as well, especially, yeah?
Right.
Many,
So,
many people
yes,
are curious about this.
the Society of Free and Independent Enterprise. Everything you need to know about Sophie is in that name, the Society of Free and Independent Enterprise. So, Sophie was born out of two periods of intense frustration.
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, back in 2017, 2018, I was the founder and I was running a law firm, a regulated law firm called Everyman Legal Limited. And I've got a great team and we got a great product, The Boss, which we'll come on to discuss later. The Boss is a way of helping business owners think of the future and then create a legal framework which allows them to grow to a successful exit. So we got this great product that I developed with a young team and we were really proud of it and we were getting some great work in, but we weren't getting enough work in to feed us all as we would like to have been fed. So we ended up forming a group of us who met at the Even Load pub for breakfast. This was just outside Oxford. We met once a month for breakfast and we were working out how we could form a collaborative collective of people with different skills. There was me, there was my friend, the accountant, Ian Wallard, as a chartered accountant. There was a very capable HR man. That's to belittle Rod to call him HR. He's a sort of behavioural change guru. And there were about 8 or 9 of us would meet regularly. And that was my first conception of how Sophie could be created. So it was to be a group of pioneering advisors, really, who had a different way of helping entrepreneurs grow their companies to a successful exit. And we all got very excited about it. But the problem for me was I'd got a business that I wasn't able to scale.
Mm-hmm.
And Sophie, for me, with the Supper Club, was going to be a way that I would find and connect with those business owners and understand them and befriend them so I could help them. But I had to turn my attention to my own challenges. And sadly for me, I had to put Everyman Legal into administration, which happened in September 2019. It broke my heart after 12 years of effort and building a great team, but the money never lies, does it, Matthew?
No,
At least
absolutely not. But at least
usually.
this sub performance, is quite a relaxed way to meet entrepreneurs. So yeah, that's quite inspiring. That's quite
Yeah.
inspiring. How long have you been going on with this?
Right. So I was telling you, Matthew, about two periods of frustration. So the first period was I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't scale Everyman Legal, put into administration, started Everyman Advisory. So that was September 2019. And months later, we'll know what happened, don't we? March 2022. Boris Johnson up at number 10 and saying, I'm telling the nation to go home and you're not to go to the office. So that was okay for me because I'd spent 6 months learning about working from home as my base. But I had no idea about Zoom video conferencing. We knew nothing of that, or some of us didn't in 2020. So I was doing a deal, and in order to get it done, we had to quickly learn how to use Zoom. We negotiated the deal, got it done, and I thought, wow, this is great. And then I started doing webinars with the Institute of Directors. I was the chair of the Oxfordshire branch, and this was wonderful. We were getting anything from 50 to more than 100 people on these webinars, and we were organizing panels of advisors, and it was great. But I was really worried that lockdown was having a ruinous effect on some of my best clients. And I remember organizing a Zoom call with one guy, senior guy at the IOD, and two of my entrepreneurs. Both of them had good businesses, both with 100 employees. They were big clients for me, and I was really keen to help them. And they were both businesses were really struggling. And I was keen that the IOD should put out a members survey so we would find out who was struggling. Whereas the IOD were going along to number 10 every week and they came back and said, oh, please, could we tell them how
Mm-hmm.
lockdown was working? I thought, well, it might be working for some, but it isn't going to be working for a lot of people. So that burning sense of frustration, which eventually led the powers that be at the IOD to say, James, your time as chair of the Oxfordshire branch has come to an end. I thought, hooray. And we literally segued straight into Sophie Enterprises doing the webinars. So one week it was the IOD doing this webinar. The next week it was Sophie Enterprises doing the webinar. And then within 3 weeks, we created a website for Soapy Enterprises, which was going to be this membership club, which was then going to be associated, and I'll come on to this in a second, with the 1845 Connect Supper Club. And it was all great. And then we had right. I'm gonna explain now the charter. So I
Mhm.
said it was the Society of Free and Independent Enterprise. Now I
Tell
don't know
us all
how
about
well
this.
that.
That sounds like an historical document, right? Yeah.
Well, it's historical for me. It
Okay.
was it was drawn on my love of the American Declaration of Independence
Hmm.
by lawyers, it has to be said. So if I may, I'm going to read it out, Matthew. I'll do
Yes,
it
go ahead.
this one. So
We
this
want to
this
know about
was
this,
this was created, by the way, with the immaculate handwriting
Let's
of my
call it
daughter.
Independence Day for many, yeah? Okay.
Yes. So my daughter Phoebe, who's a very good graphic artist now, I bought her a calligraphy set, and she very
Mhm.
kindly drafted this for me in the fashion of the American Declaration of Independence. So it reads that Sophie is going to be a fellowship of founders and followers. So then we had a formal signing of this, and I'll come on to this about the party on the 4th of July 2020. So the signatories of this declaration establishing the Society of Free and Independent Enterprise declare these truths to be self-evident. One, society progresses by the courage of unreasonable men and women who refuse to accept an imperfect world and strive to change it and make it better. Two, those men and women are driven by a spirit of enterprise. Three, a noble enterprise represents a communion of founders and followers. So it's always a brave one, two, three people who start an enterprise, and they're to be applauded. But without the followers, you've got no ability to scale unless you're organized in a particular way. Number four, entrepreneurs are custodians of the organizations of which they are founders. And when taking decisions, including as to control and ownership transition, they ought to be guided by the responsibilities of a custodian. Those responsibilities include the interests of the followers of their enterprise. So, recognizing these self-evident truths, the signatories pledge to build a society that teaches these truths, a society dedicated to life, liberty, and stronger communities in England, Wales, where I'm now based, Scotland and Northern Ireland, and indeed throughout the world. So at Ian Woolard's offices in Fulbrook, Oxfordshire, we all gathered on the 4th of July when we were allowed out of lockdown, and we signed this declaration. Now, at that stage, a lady from our village, Nikki, who'd helped me with the IOD webinars that became the Sophie webinars, she was very excited at the party we were having on the 4th of July. And I was upstairs supervising the signature of the charter by local businessmen and friends. And I came downstairs, and poor old Nikki had had a very, very bad fall. And she ended up having to be taken by ambulance to the hospital, the John Radcliffe. She got a very severe fracture of the eye. And then it was discovered that when they were doing the x-rays, that she actually had a brain tumor, which was
Mhm.
operated on 12 months later. Now, the bizarre thing is that had she not had that dreadful fall, which somewhat disrupted the launch party of Sophie, her brain tumor would not have been discovered. Now, I spoke to Nikki the other day. She's now recovered. She just spent two lovely winters in Australia with her sister, where she was able to work remotely as the Blockley Parish Clerk, which is the village in Gloucestershire where I used to live. Anyway, that's a rather long, long
Well, thank you
story.
so much. This is such a fascinating story. And
Yeah.
we now know there is Independence Day also for entrepreneurs. Thank you.
On
This
the
is
4th
so
of
great,
July.
Yeah, 4th of July, by the way.
Yeah, so
Okay.
let me then briefly mention 1845 Connect, because that is it's a subsidiary company runs that, a subsidiary of Sophie Enterprises. And Ian and his partner Hannah, Ian the chartered accountant and his partner Hannah, um, effectively rescued 1845 when the founder Sharon Houghton had got a job and she didn't want to run it anymore. She'd run it successfully for 10 years and had indeed tried to scale it. At one stage, she was running 3 supper clubs, and they worked very effectively together because there was a group of, say, 15 or 20 in one, 15 or 20 in another, then a third group, and then they would all meet every quarter together. So you got that mixing of different people and perspectives. So we relaunched the Supper Club, Ian, Hannah, and I, and it's gone into stagnation, I have to say, Matteo. But and I know you talk about the 4 stages of business, and stagnation is one, and crisis is another if you're not careful. I remember crisis with Every Bad Legal when we were before we relaunched in 2019. Anyway,
And
we've
actually,
not
in
yet
fact, one
been
of the
able.
title of the webinar upcoming is From Stack to Scaling.
Right.
There's a remedy for that as well.
Right, good. I'm sure we'll talk about that shortly. So anyway, we've decided that it's going to be the end of September, beginning of March. We're
Hmm.
going to launch a London supper club, which is then going to um, partner with the Oxford Supper Club. And we want to grow this supper club as this way of entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial advisors meeting, enjoying one another's company in these very challenging times of AI and world affairs that we're all reading about and experiencing. So we think now is the time. The time has come, and time is short
Well,
because AI.
founders don't look away from this.
Yeah,
This is your opportunity, yeah?
that's right.
So to join the Independence Day Club and, as I said, from stack to scaling. Yeah.
That's right, and to be part of a movement of free and independent enterprise. We don't want these big global corporations bossing us around, Matthew.
And as we said many times, the exponential blueprint is not about information. Information can be found everywhere. We are
Yeah,
about transformation, yeah. So
yeah,
this leads me very nicely into the next question. I wanted to ask you this, yeah. Now, the entrepreneurs you support, in your life, you must have observed some patterns, yeah. Now, the
yes.
question is, when you look back,
Mm.
into the history, also, even before you founded this upper club, effectively. Now, in your view, what separates those who scale from those who stagnate? Tell me about your experience. Yeah.
Right, I'd say there's one very significant factor that entrepreneurs who can scale have that others can't, and that is a strategic instinct. Now, I would say of myself, I have a fragile strategic instinct. Not a strong one. And if I'm working, some of the best entrepreneurs I've worked with, um, you explain something complex to them, and they've immediately they know where they're going and how they're
Hmm.
going to get there, and they've got this vision. So strategic vision, and it's something that's very often overlooked, misunderstood, but and it's more than just having a goal. It's you've got to have this clear vision of where you want to get to, and then you're bringing a team with you towards that vision, and it is that strategic now. I mean, it's obviously got to be grounded in the numbers and business acumen.
Yeah,
But
the unforgettable Steve Jobs once said, turning complexity into simplicity is actually the reason many businesses are successful. As we many times say, uh, sometimes, well, obviously we see, sometimes people ask me, what is a successful business? What does it
yeah,
look like? And most of the time, you will agree with me on this, James, we see the creation of predictable patterns. Yeah. Tell me if that's also your experience.
predictable partners, did you say?
Yeah, predictable patterns.
Oh,
Patterns. Yeah.
patterns,
Yeah.
predictable patterns. Yes,
Yeah.
patterns. Yes. Yes, I mean there are predictable ways to go. The big challenge, I think, with most businesses and moving towards an exit is actually the psychology of the founder and the
Hmm.
team dynamic between them and their co-founders or followers. And one pattern I've noticed is that people who start businesses, almost by definition, are frustrated and want to be in control. And that then it's great when they start, but then when they're trying to scale, it becomes very difficult because no one can control other people. Certainly not if they're good people. So you're in danger of having people who will do what they're told. And you need independent thinkers who will think independently and help you grow the business. And if I've seen a number, bizarre as it may seem, of entrepreneurs who I would say spike their own guns. My oldest client, he's ex-client really, he's in his late 80s. He went through six managing directors, and the pattern was always the same. It was right. I'm giving this chap 2-year trial, and I thought, right, when's he going to get sacked? And this gentleman did not want them to succeed. It might sound bizarre, but he knew if they became successful, he would lose control of his enterprise, and his whole identity, sadly, bizarrely, was in that enterprise, and he didn't want to think someone else would take control of it.
Could not agree more on that, James. And I would say we often say the phrase, let go or stay small,
Yeah,
because control obsessed owners, unfortunately, they very rarely succeed. And we just have to see how the biggest entrepreneurs have been successful. We just have to watch what happens in history. Let's watch, how did Jeff Bezos become the person that he is? Obviously it's not because he was control obsessed. He decided to create a team. Alongside. That's
yeah,
absolutely fundamental. So that's another message for you founders. Control obsession does not win, never. And
no,
you have to adapt to the stage in which you are. Startup is one stage in which probably you're going to be doing everything yourself. But when it comes to scale up, that doesn't apply anymore. So
yes. There's
absolutely, yeah.
one other thing I learned, Mattia, and this was from my good friend Rod Willis, who I mentioned earlier. Rod was a great studier of leadership, and he introduced me to this Hogrev model, the primary colors of leadership. And this
Mhm.
teaches that there are uh, three domains of leadership: the strategic domain, the interpersonal domain, and the operational domain. And they're in the three primary colors. And if you get it right, you have that white light of brilliant leadership coming together at the center. So it's having that balanced team because there's no point just having a brilliant strategic leader if he upsets all of the team or if he's not good enough at delivering results. And people who are very good operationally at delivering results often are not good strategic thinkers or they're not good with people.
You need
So
the right cocktail, yeah. You need the right
you need
cocktail.
you
Yeah.
need the three personality types as the founding team of founders and followers in your organization. That's
We
my view.
often say we often say passion. I always say passion will win one game, but
Yeah,
discipline will win one tournament.
yeah,
So let me lead nicely into the next question. So given what we said about those who are better than other one at scaling, yeah,
yeah.
even with that in mind, why do you believe private companies they have so much difficulties, they struggle to access the right growth capital or liquidity options in general?
Right. So back to so there's two things playing out. There's first of all the founders might be too controlling and not strategic
Hmm.
enough in their thinking. And then if they are bold enough to think, right, I want to grow my business, and they try and grow it, and when the challenges come, they're prepared to keep going. Then, well, where do they go for the money? So we have
Very good question. Many
we
people
have a
they want to see an answer to this. Go ahead,
yeah,
James.
right. So we have a completely dysfunctional banking system. And actually, we have a completely dysfunctional equity markets position in this country, which is why we have the problem. There's a great video clip that I recommend people watch. I must have watched it about 20 times myself. Professor Richard Werner, professor of
Hmm.
banking at Oxford University. He talks about money creation by commercial banks, and he contrasts Britain with Germany. So Germany has 1,500 small community banks. None of them have ever gone bust in 200 years. We have big banks, four of them. And what happened in 2008? They got into financial difficulty. And the problem is they want to lend to big borrowers and they want to lend to people who can provide security in the form of land, commodities. And so if you contrast that with Germany, you have small local banks whose managers know the founders, the entrepreneurs, the engineers who are running these businesses. They're often two, three, four, fourth generation businesses, and they are geared up to long-term growth with a supportive relationship from their bank. Ours are just not like that. If you look at the lending our banks want to do, it's for leveraged management buyouts. And we'll come on to that in a minute. And then the dysfunctional capital markets. Well, this goes right back to this. So we used to have functional stock markets. And we used to have people called stockbrokers. Now we've still got them now, but now the vast majority of the capital flows go through fund managers, BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street. And this is all what's called passive investing. So it's you invest in the FTSE 100, the FTSE 250, the Standard and Poor's 500, whatever it is. And so it's not about individuals looking at the future direction of markets. It's not about those stockbrokers and their analysts carefully researching the team, the management team of a company and the direction it's heading and producing carefully thought through research papers. It's all about, oh, right, well, if they're big, we'll put our money in them. So
Dude, I
what's
want to ask you a
happening?
question. Why do you think we're not talking more about these things? Why are we not talking more about, for example, central banks? In a few words, what do you think is there's lack of communication that there should be? It should be in favor, obviously, of the independence of businesses as well.
Well, so if you were being charitable, you'd say it was because the establishment has to be cautious in order to protect us from malign influences and cowboys. And then we look back at 2008 and think, well, they didn't do a very good job, did they? I'm
Indeed,
afraid
yeah.
I am I'm afraid I'm not being charitable. I'm cynical. The current system works fine for those who are on their way up the pyramid of piffle, as Boris Johnson might call it, or certainly I would call it that, because life shouldn't be about money and aggrandizement. It should all be about wonderful creativity through free enterprise, a society of free and independent enterprise where things are as local as possible. And yes, we want international, but that's collaborative. It's not global corporations who want to control us.
Ah, it's great to hear your view on these things because, as we always say, we live in a system, education system, central banks, governments, where we see so much education created for us to manage wealth. But what about wealth creation?
Yes.
Because you can only manage wealth if someone else creates wealth. And this is why the Exponential Blueprint was founded in January this year. And so it's such a pleasure for me to have James about talking these things today because you can see how we are going into this direction. And that leads me to another question now, which I wanted to ask you is now given your history, okay? given the foundation of Sophie 1845 Supper Club, and given also what's about to happen, with this new launch in September, as you said,
Yeah.
uh, what were the moments you remember where you were most proud about yourself, about supporting founders on the journey? Just give us some example where you really felt like you struck very, very high on this, yeah.
Right. So the most wonderful early experience was this one,
Okay.
Walter Whiting. So the job of the lawyer, the young lawyer on the team, was to take the prospectus, which had to be signed at the signing meeting, to take it to Company's House, which was City Road, London. So you'd get in a taxi, you'd go there, and you had to hand it over, and you're always terrified someone the team at Company's House wouldn't be prepared to accept it anyway. So I did that, and I came back, and everyone was waiting for me with a glass of champagne. And Jeremy said, "Oh, the Jeremy Bradner, this wonderful guy, taught me." He said, "Well, that was wonderful," because he said normally they'd just leave. They were kind enough to wait for the young lawyer to go to Company's House, come back in the taxi, and share a glass of champagne with me. And it was the most magical experience of my life. And whether it's floating a company or actually just helping someone in difficulty on a small transaction, I find them both equally emotionally rewarding. They
Hmm.
might not be as financially rewarding, but it's that connection with people. Just after I started Everyman Advisory, I had the most difficult shareholder dispute. And funnily enough, if you've gone back 7 years, I'd advised the then founder we did the boss methodology, imagine the future, and think about doing a vendor funded buyout to sell to the two managers who only had 20% of the shares, that the founder still had 80% of the shares. And he decided that no, he was going to stick with his will. He asked me at the time, the 7 years before, I'm leaving the shares to these two guys in my will. Do you think it's a good idea? And I said, Terry, I think it's a very bad idea. And then he ended up marrying this lady, which then revoked his will. So suddenly we got a battle royal between these two young guys. One of them had started out as an apprentice in that business at age 16. The other one had come in when it was close to collapse and had turned it round. So these guys had literally given their whole life and soul to this enterprise. And we had a 6 month battle before we persuaded the powers that be that vendor funded buyout was the way to go. And if I look back now at their accounts, I look at them up every year, and they're doing very well. So it was a real test for them, and it was a real test for me.
And so
We were being threatened.
building a legacy must have been one of your best, your best memories, the best moment for you, because
Yes.
it's as of today, you can still see the results of what you've done then, yeah?
Yeah. Although they do say, Matthew, don't they? In politics, everything ends in failure. So
Okay.
in the long run, we're all dead. So then the question is, what do you really want to do with your limited time on the planet? And I do think we are facing, without sounding over dramatic about it, we are facing the most monumental challenge in society. I mean, we've got three young grandchildren now, and I look at them and think, what's the world going to be like for them? And it's up to us, our generation, and those in their 30s and 40s who've got experience and time to really step up and be entrepreneurial and come together, because we've got to ensure transformational change at pace. Otherwise, we're going to have a very unhappy world in which we're all going to live.
Now
So
I'm
it's
all
up to
for it.
us.
I'm all for this. It's all about, as I said, nowadays, especially with the artificial intelligence, information is absolutely everywhere. But what is the transformation? So that's the question. So
Yeah,
that's why the exponential blueprint does not publish, it's not just give you information. It's not about tips. We're not giving you tips. We are giving
yeah,
you the opportunity to transform your business. And our partnership with James Hunt and Sophie 1845 is just align with this, the strong alignment. Yeah.
Yes, I went to well, we live now here in Pembrokeshire, and just after we moved here, I went to a very interesting conference at the Lampeter campus of the University of Wales. And there was a very slick management consultant talking about change, the vision of change. And this reminds me of a program on the BBC recently. It was the first 12 months of Labour, the vision of change. And I thought, change isn't a vision. And there was a guy from the floor put his hand up and said to this clever consultant, don't we know where we're trying to go? Don't we need to decide that first? And the consultant, a very clever consultant's answer, no, just small steps. Small steps to where? So we need the entrepreneurial community, I think, to come together with an inspiring vision of the future. Now, to me, an inspiring vision is in some respects going back in time to when the relations between people were more natural. But at the same time, embracing some of the wonderful technology, because AI could be a magnificent liberator, or it could be a terrible curse on humanity. And it's up to us to make sure it's a tool that we use effectively.
As I always say, human intelligence was born to innovate. Yeah. So not to forget for our audience, we don't really want anyone to think that AI should be it's just a tool. It's an acceleration. The same way as Google 20 years ago taught us about engine searches. Now we can do so much more with AI. So that's the way to look at it. Yeah. So don't
Yeah.
forget, AI is really an accelerator. We, human intelligence, they are the innovator. So that's the way we should look at
Yes.
it. And that takes me to the next question, really. Last question for this part, really. Tell us in a few words, James, or as many as you think are needed, really. What's the mission of SOFI 1845? And tell us also in your words, how does the community play a role in business acceleration?
Right. So I see SOFI being an education and know-how platform.
Mm-hmm.
So that those pioneering advisors who've got different frameworks and methodologies for creating simplicity in complex decision making, so that they have an effective platform to take those innovative methodologies to market. And I see then the Supper Club being a way of creating community between entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial advisors, so that people gain the trust and confidence to embrace these challenging ways of proceeding. So in a world where everyone tells you this is what you need to do, if you're a business owner, you exit by a trade sale. Well, you don't have to do it that way. There are different ways forward if you've got the right advisors around you. So I really do think that SOFI in 1845 can be part of a transformational change.